Hi everyone, I have a great quilt for you today in Lessons from an Old Quilt. This is so cool. This quilt measures 78 by 78, so it's a nice big quilt. I think it was made in the late 1960s, early 1970s, maybe a little later. It is so cool. I got it in an auction. I paid $43 for it, so apparently somebody didn't want to go above 42. I was willing to though. And I love this quilt. It's really interesting. And it was one of those quilts that I got that I was like, okay, it's a cool quilt. But the more I looked at it and the more I learned about it, oh my goodness, wait till you see this block and how it all comes together. So cool. And like I did last time, I will have a tutorial on this block coming up this week. So I will link that too at the end of this video once it is up. I can't wait to share that tutorial with you because it's very scrappy and very fun. Just like this quilt, scrappy and fun. So let's get started taking a closer look at this beautiful quilt. Okay, so let's take a look at this block. So the block is right here. You can see it's made up of a pinwheel in the middle. We have strips of fabric on the sides, and then it has 4 half square triangles on the corners, giving it this really cool look. And the block by itself is really nice, but when we pull it away, we can see we have these wonderful corners that are created when you put all of these blocks together. And it tricks the eye into making it almost a little more complicated than it is. So let's line this up again. I want to talk about some of these fabrics. So to get this cool effect, again, we see that the dark is on this side and the light is on this side. Within each of these blocks, all of the pinwheel fabrics are exactly the same fabrics. What's different, however, are these side pieces and these other halves of the half square triangles. So each block is a bit unique in that aspect, keeping the fabrics the same, but between the blocks, they're a little different. Let me show you what I mean. Move this over a little. You can see this block, the same exact block, has pink and a turquoise here in the corners, changing the look a little bit. We see another one right here with green. And I was so curious what the maker chose different fabrics to go where. So I just had to draw it up and see what kind of pattern there is. And there really isn't a pattern other than the maker seemed to have a rule that 2 pinks weren't together, 2 ginghams were together. So they are scattered about. One unique thing that I find interesting is there are 2 at the top. I'll show you here. And there's one here and one here that is a fabric that doesn't show up anywhere else. There is quite a bit of fading on this quilt, and you can especially see it here where we see this fabric has really faded over the years. We also see it in the center blocks, the pinwheels. This one over here is much darker, and then they fade to a greenish, almost like an army green. The fabrics themselves are interesting too, because these are not all cottons. In fact, this pink fabric is a very heavy polyester. These corner fabrics are denim. This green fabric is almost like an upholstery fabric. And then of course we do have the regular cottons that you'd see. I believe this might have been made out of clothing because of the different fabrics that are in it and because of some of the prints. The one thing I do want to note that when you do sew fabrics together like this with different weights, you do tend to have some tearing because of the pull of the different weight of fabrics working together or not working together. And we see that throughout this quilt. There's plenty of holes and little pockets where fabric just was shredded to pieces, unfortunately. We can repair it, but that is something to be aware of. This entire quilt is machine piece, but it is hand quilted. And the coolest thing about the hand quilting, of course, is in these squares where the maker made circles. I love that because it's a very geometric quilt, and to add those circles add a little bit of softness too. We also see some curves on the border. You can see that here. Look how pretty. It's gorgeous. It's so well done. Now, because there are holes, we can take a peek inside, which I always love. And you can see it's like a flannel or cotton sheet inside of here. And you can see it's just like a very lightweight sheet. The quilt itself is heavy, and I think it's because of all of the wonderful fabrics and the different types of fabrics, but it is a very lightweight batting that's inside. Okay, so let's take a look at the back. so the back is made up of this wonderful 1930s, I believe, print fabric. It's seamed down the middle, and it's so cool. Now, I believe the whole quilt itself was made in the 1960s, 1970s, just because of some of the fabrics, but I find it interesting that we see this wonderful 1930s, 1940s print, probably more 40s, on the back. It just goes to show, you know, I mean, we keep fabrics in our stash sometimes, and I think that might be what happened here. I don't believe it's a reproduction fabric just because of some of the registration lines on the fabric, but again, it could be too. This is such a busy print that you don't see the quilting on the back, but it absolutely is there, and I don't even think I can get a picture of it because it blends in so well. Now the binding is like a 1960s print. It is a traditional binding where it is sewn onto the front and then turned around to the back and hand stitched down. So overall, with the fading and with the tears, I'd say the condition is fair, but it's still, what a wonderful example of a beautiful quilt that can be made out of scraps of fabric, whether it be clothes or not. What can we learn from this quilt? And there are so many things. If I don't cover something that you've thought of, please make sure to mention it in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think and what we can learn as makers from this. So the first thing that I see that I think is really interesting has to do with the hand quilting. So this maker used circles and curves in this quilt along with the crosshatch lines. I think that's so smart. Because this quilt is geometric and has a lot of hard edges, especially around the navy blue secondary pattern that we will talk about in a minute, it adds another texture, another layer of softness. So think about that when you are quilting your own quilts. How can you make it a little more interesting? And I definitely think the maker did do just that, make it more interesting with this quilting. The next thing I want you to consider or learn from this quilt is if you are going to use clothing or any non-traditional cotton fabrics, actually scratch that. If you're going to use fabrics that is a mix of different types of fabrics, so if you're using cottons mixed with denims or polyesters mixed with denims or polyesters mixed with cottons or whatever it might be, make sure that you are aware of the different weights and how that will influence how the quilt will hold up. And some suggestions that you might want to think about if you are going to mix different fabric types is to use interfacing or some sort of stabilizer that's going to allow them to kind of meet in the middle with the weights of the fabrics. I hope that makes sense. But you don't want the holes that have happened in this quilt. And I really do think it's a direct result of those different fabrics and different weights of fabrics playing together and not playing really well. So consider that if you are going to mix them. And finally, the third thing that we can learn from this quilt is that navy blue placement. I loved it. I kind of knew what the pattern was. I've been quilting a long time, as you know, over 25 years, blah, blah, blah. I guess I didn't realize the impact that navy blue in the corners of each of those blocks would make on this overall quilt until I really started inspecting and studying this particular quilt. I just think it's incredible. What a wonderful design. What a wonderful way for this designer to bring that block up to a new level. I love it. And it's denim. It's so cool, so cool. And just for the record, this quilt is also Daisy approved. And they aren't all Daisy approved, believe it or not, but this one is. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you check out the tutorial on this block that's coming up this week. It was so much fun to make. It was so much fun to recreate this, just like I did with the red quilt that I featured a few weeks ago. It was so much fun recreating that block too. And if you like this, please let me know in the comments that you want me to keep doing this where I recreate the blocks. Now, some of the quilts that I have, I probably can't recreate the blocks as easily, but I'll see what I can do for most of them. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you take some time to sew, and I'll see you real soon. Bye.